a requirement under the IDEA, which is the law that creates special education services. There's a requirement for a parent training and information center in every state. So Iowa has the Parent Training and Information Center of Iowa, or ASK Resource Center. We're Iowa's Parent Training and Information Center, and we're part of this national network of parent centers, which is really great because we can cooperate, share resources, create trainings together, and different things like that. Part of that also then includes the fact that a lot of our materials are vetted or approved by the Office of Special Education Programs, which is really awesome because that means that a lot of the resources that we have are really high quality information that the federal government agrees with. So that's helpful in the process. Some of the things that the Parent Training and Information Center do are information around disability rights, all kinds of information about conflict resolution. I do a lot of one-on-one and small group support, so I talk to families on the phone. They'll call in and ask a question, and I try to provide information. I'll usually send out a packet of information to a family, and if I don't know the answer to the question, I have access to an attorney that I can ask and do some problem solving with. So a lot of what I do is just kind of brainstorming, you know, what have you tried? Here's some other things that might be helpful to try. Next steps. We also have a lot of trainings like the one that we're doing today, some that we do over the phone. We're starting to do webinars also, and a lot in person. We have a newsletter and a lot of email communications that are busy at this point. So some of our other projects right now include the Family to Family Health Information Center. And so just like the Parent Training and Information Center provides information around special education services and educational supports, the Health Information Center is there to provide information and support around health services. And so different kinds of insurance, waivers, all kinds of different things with the Affordable Care Act. We really have a lot of information to provide to families around all of that. So we have a number of staff that are trained to provide that kind of information. We also have the post-secondary transition training program, and so we have a number of trainings that are meant to help families understand that life after high school and how to get from school to life after, and what supports are available to help get our kids ready for that process. We've got some trainings around that, and so you can do those online, you can do them face-to-face, or you can do them over the phone. Another project that we have is the Dispute Resolution Training Project, where they do mediation kinds of training. And lastly is the FIND project, which is kind of like social networking. It's kind of like a Facebook page for families of children with disabilities in Iowa. It also includes professionals. So if you're looking for a way to network around disabilities specifically, the FIND project is new, and it's really kind of a cool thing that we're doing. We haven't seen a lot of projects like that in other states, so it's kind of a cool new thing that we're trying. It's www.findfamilies.org if you're interested. So I'm going to really get into the reason why you're here today is educational supports for students with disabilities, and specifically students with brain injuries. There are a lot of different supports that are available, and so this slide here is just showing you kind of the overview. The big circle there is general public school education, which would include, you know, that's your No Child Left Behind. All kids in public schools fit into that big bubble. That's No Child Left Behind. It's the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and so every kid in public schools fits into that big bubble. The orange bubble then is for accommodations, and so under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehab Act, there are accommodations that have to be allowed for kids with disabilities, and then also that special education bubble allows for accommodations and specially designed instruction. So we're going to talk about those things a lot more specifically. The accommodations bubble would include things like Section 504 plans. It might include things like those RTI interventions that are going on. You might hear about building assistance teams that are working with students to to try some interventions or to try to do some things a little bit differently than your general classroom, your general ed classroom. So accommodations are just allowing access to that same gen ed curriculum. There is only one curriculum in the state, and that's the Iowa core curriculum. You can find information around that on the Department of Ed's website. But all students are receiving instruction from that core curriculum. And so even students that are in special education, they would get both accommodations and then also some specially designed instruction to help them to access that general ed curriculum. And so we'll talk about what the qualification processes look like and things like that throughout this presentation. The language of the Rehabilitation Act says that no otherwise qualified person with a disability in the United States shall solely by the reason of his or her disability be excluded from participation in or denied the benefits of or be subject to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So you can think about all the different places that that might apply. Section 504 is not just for schools. It also applies to work, public buildings, park and recreation departments and programs. You know, any program that's receiving federal financial assistance cannot discriminate against a person that has a disability. And so really what that means is that we have to allow them to have access or to be able to benefit from that program just the same as anyone else that doesn't have a disability. So Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act prohibits discrimination based on the disability so that people can access programs and the benefits of those programs. And in order to do that, sometimes we have to provide accommodations. So there are a lot of different ways that we can provide accommodations to people with disabilities. Sometimes that looks like you know, closer seating, or maybe you would get a note taker. There's so many different ways that people can receive accommodations. So the eligibility process for Section 504 is a federal, it's the same across the United States. Every district is a little bit different the way they implement the 504 plan and the way they design the rights and responsibilities, but the determination is the same, the eligibility process. A person must have a disability. That disability must substantially limit one or more life activities for that person, and then it must also require accommodations to prevent that discrimination piece that we talked about. So we're going to talk about what each of those pieces means a little bit more here. This would also include people who have a history of or are regarded as having a disability, a physical or mental impairment. So even if somebody doesn't actually have a disability, if people think that they might have a disability, they could be protected under Section 504. So some of examples of that include, you know, brain injury, all kinds of different disabilities, and really you don't even necessarily have to have a certain level of, you know, it's really about how does this disability impact you. You can't say just because you have ADHD or just because you have a brain injury you automatically will qualify. That's where we get into these next pieces, the substantially limits and the major life activities. So we really have to look at how does the disability impact a person's life. Each district is going to have a 504 manual or a procedures guide that would help the parents to understand what that qualification process looks like. Some schools require like a note from a doctor. Others ask for teachers to do some assessments and identify some of the barriers that they see to students in the classroom. So it's a little bit different in every district what that process looks like for eligibility. But parents and educators ought to be able to find the 504 manual or procedures guide that would explain to them what the process looks like, what their rights are in the process, and how to appeal a decision that they disagree with. So the Office of Civil Rights has decided that in order to qualify for Section 504, there has to be a disability that substantially limits a major life activity. And so major life activities are just about any, I mean, there's so many things that could be: walking, breathing, seeing, learning, you know, name it, you know, as long as it's a real significant piece of a person's life. I've seen a lot of different things: memory, just the way the person conducts themselves, their behavior. So, you know, these things can all be included under major life activities. And one of the things that they look at is, you know, compared to the general population, how does this person function compared to the general population? If it's something that takes a substantial effort, or you know, looks substantially different than the way a typical person would be able to perform the task, then we probably, it would probably be a substantial limit. But obviously these things are very interpretable, so it's kind of hard to know for sure. There is no hard line, there's no hard definition of what that actually is. So it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes. One of the things that we often would suggest in this process then is that a parent would request an evaluation, or that they be considered, that their student be considered for a 504 plan in writing. We have a sample letter on the Ask Resource Center website, as well as plenty of information around 504 plans. And so if you're interested in some of that, you can go to www.askresource.org in order to check out that sample letter. And really what we ask is that you just specifically ask for Section 504 plan accommodations, as well as listing some of the specific concerns that you have and why you feel your child might qualify, or the reasons why you think your child might benefit from having a 504 plan. Typically in that process, a team will get together and talk about what all needs to be considered. Are there evaluation processes that need to happen first? And then a lot of times there will be a meeting with teachers and parents to determine what all should be included in that plan. You know, there aren't a lot of specifics around who all is required members of that team, or, you know, what all should be included in that plan. Those plans do not get turned into the state of Iowa. Or it's not Iowa specifically, but states in general don't monitor 504 plans in the same way that they do special education. So, you know, if there are issues with the 504 plan, in order to problem solve that, we have to go another place than the state. So we can talk about that a little bit more. You know, Section 504 does also apply to extracurricular and non-academic activities. And so that's another thing that's really, really awesome about the law, is that, you know, we can ask for accommodations so that our students can participate. And, you know, we know that those extracurricular and non-academic activities are really those things that, you know, help get kids into college and, you know, are really meaningful social connections in the community. And so it's important that our kids have these have access just the same. So is there an associate that could help them? Is there, you know, some type of device that might, you know, enable that student to play with the team, or you know, participate in whatever the club is. So, you know, that's not something that should be off the table anyway. We need to really think about how 504 can allow access to those non-traditional or non-academic activities, things that we wouldn't necessarily think of as just automatically part of the school day. we really need to make sure that students are included with that too. The big thing is documentation in writing. What are the accommodations? How is it going to be provided? When is this going to happen, and who's responsible for it? These are really important things. Unfortunately, there are times where I hear about situations where we kind of just decide that there are certain accommodations that might be needed, but maybe we don't really need to write those down right now, or we're just gonna write them down, but we're not gonna call it a 504 plan. Or so I think that it's important to just have things documented as much as possible, because that helps with accountability for everybody. When things are in writing, you have a clear idea of what the expectation is, and so does everybody else that helped to write that. And so it just helps to take out some of the questions around, who's responsible and things like that, when we've got clear documentation of, who's responsible for what and when and all of that good stuff. So when you're writing that plan, it's just a good idea to really think through kind of the who, what, where, when kind of pieces of that puzzle. And so when things are going smoothly, a team typically meets once per year, but as often as the team needs to. Anytime there's a change, anytime there's the plan isn't working the way it's supposed to, it's a good idea to call a meeting and pull that team together. There isn't anything in the law that requires a meeting every so often. Typically they suggest once per year, but there really aren't a lot of precedents around that. So typically schools like to get together kind of at the beginning of the school year, and let's meet with the teachers and talk about what this is going to look like and everything like that. We definitely suggest that that's a good idea, and maybe to meet even ahead of time, before school starts, and then check back after so many months to say, hey, how's this going? Is there any tweaks that we need to make to this plan to make sure that it's working the way it needs to be? Now, if things don't go the way they're supposed to, there is some complaint processes and processes that are available to problem solve these kinds of things. One thing that we always suggest is just to put some concerns in writing. We often suggest that you just write a letter to the school and or the someone outside of that actual building, so maybe like the superintendent, or also there's a 504 coordinator for the district. So there may be a 504 coordinator for the building as well as a 504 coordinator for the district itself. Sometimes we would suggest that you would go ahead and send your letter to someone outside of that actual building, just to help that accountability piece. So you might write a letter just stating, here's some of the concerns that I have, and could you please respond to me in writing? And so that would be one kind of first step. But if things really don't change, or you feel like things aren't working very well, you might contact that 504 coordinator and ask what the complaint process is, or how to appeal their decision, or different things like that. What you can do to problem solve these kinds of situations. Sometimes they'll have like a facilitator or somebody who can come in and try to help facilitate the conversation and just come up with some agreement. When it comes down to it, like I said before, the state of Iowa doesn't have a lot of responsibilities over Section 504. They actually do have a 504 coordinator at the state, but that person doesn't have any actual authority over the 504 plans. So if parents are interested in appealing the 504 plan or making a complaint, that would actually go to the Office of Civil Rights. And I apologize, I can't remember for sure if right now in our area, if that's out of Chicago or the Kansas City area, but it's not somebody that's real close by here that we can just call and say, hey, can you come check this out? So there are those coordinators, and I'm happy to talk to anybody around these kinds of issues if it's helpful to just call and talk to someone, and help me. I can help you to write a letter or some different things like that. That's part of what we do. So the other option I think that's always available is the AEA has the resolution facilitators, and so the resolution facilitators are like mediators who are available for anybody in the educational system. And so that's another good option if we're just looking for a way to kind of do some problem solving and figure out what some ways to kind of get past that bump might be. So that is section 504 in a nutshell. I don't see any questions right now, but I'm going to go ahead and open it up a little bit if anybody has any questions. Next, we're going to go into the special education piece and then do a little comparison. So we'll get into a little bit more about what the differences are. But does anybody have any questions right now about that 504 piece?
Doesn't look like I have any questions from anybody here on this end.
Okay, well, I will just keep going then because I've got plenty of content and I'm afraid not quite enough time. So we'll just keep right on moving. I'm going to just bring you back to the big picture here. We're going to talk now about the special education piece. And so special education is something that, even that smaller group of kids, not only is it kids that have accommodations, but you have to be able to also require that specially designed instruction. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the IDEA and the differences between the 504 plan and the IEP. So the IDEA is the federal law that creates special education. It actually was Public Law 94-142 back in 1974. And so, it's been around a while, but it's changed. And as you can tell, Public Law 94-142 was the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. So just the language itself has changed a lot. Now we call it the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. You can tell just by the language that we use how it's progressed. This law really has changed the educational system in a lot of ways, allowing access to lots of kids that had not been allowed to participate for many years. And so, it gives kids access to that gen ed curriculum just like everybody else. There are a lot of pieces to the eligibility process, and it's a little bit different in every state. IDEA is a federal regulation, but the way each state implements it looks a little bit different. So there is a procedural safeguards manual that's available for parents and should be given out at most IEP meetings, and it's available online also. But there's a lot to learn about special education, and it's really a big there's just so much to know. Our website has tons of information on it. We do a few different kinds of trainings around IDEA and IEPs. So if you are interested in more information around IDEA or IEPs, we can always set up some additional trainings to provide to folks. So just to get into it a little bit here, the first piece of IDEA would require an evaluation. In order for a student to qualify for special education services, a comprehensive evaluation must be conducted. The little box that you see to the right there is actually from the consent form from AEA. And so when you ask for an evaluation, there are certain boxes that can be checked in order to determine which areas the evaluation will cover. For a student that has a brain injury, it could really be anything. You know, many people with many different kinds of disabilities, you know, would check all of those boxes. But you know, parents know their students better than anybody else, and so you know, let's just you know, check all the boxes that you think you have any suspicion that your child may, that the disability may impact them at school. And you know, be sure to ask, you know, what exactly is included in this. You know, the adaptive behavior box is the one that I think people don't know about the most, or you know, we're not exactly sure what that means. And those are really those functional life skills kinds of things, organization and daily living kinds of activities that lots of kids with brain injuries and other kinds of disabilities would definitely, that would be an appropriate box to check there. So you know, that is the piece of the form that is really important, and starts that 60-day timeline. So an evaluation for special education services can take up to 60 calendar days from the date that the parent signs the consent. Now, one of the issues that we've seen a lot is that parents will send a letter requesting the evaluation, but that timeline doesn't technically start until they actually sign that consent form, which requires oftentimes a meeting with the family and the school to get that ball rolling. So the sooner parents can get in there to talk about what all should be included in this evaluation and get that consent form signed, you know, let's do that as quick as we can to get those 60 calendar days going. And really, we're just looking at what are the educational needs of the student. This is the cover page of the IEP in Iowa. It's not standardized across the United States, but it is in Iowa. And, you know, that's only been for about, what, maybe 12, 15, 10 or 15 years. You know, before that, each AEA kind of had their own form. And so it's nice that we have one form across the state. So if a parent or a family moves from one part of the state to another, you know, that IEP should stay the same. Just because you move shouldn't mean that your IEP necessarily changes. So it's something that should be reviewed at least annually, but parents or educators could call a meeting at any time if they feel that that's appropriate. And you know, it's really about brainstorming, if you ask me. The IEP is a contract, and it documents all of the services that should be provided to a student in order for them to make meaningful progress at school. So it's really important to have all these key players involved. You know, you need your regular ed teacher, you need your special ed teacher, you need the parents, and you know, any of those related services people. Also, parents could invite any case manager or service provider, therapist, anybody like that that they think would be helpful for the development of that program. We often would suggest that parents let the school know that you've invited someone, just because you don't want them to surprise you with things either. So it's good to let them know that you've got somebody that you've invited to come. And sometimes it's good, even if that person doesn't necessarily have a lot of specific knowledge about that child, but as a support person for the family. You know, parents might have a hard time, you know, understanding everything that goes on at the meeting. And so maybe this person is taking notes. Maybe this person is really just there to say, hey, did you hear that the way I did? And to kind of process things after the meeting. So, you know, families are really important. And luckily, the IDEA requires parent and family involvement throughout. And that's one of the big benefits of the IEP, is just the dedication in the law to parents and involvement. So next, we're going to talk about the goals. And that's one of the other big pieces of this IEP that looks a lot different than a 504 plan. A 504 plan oftentimes won't have a goal specifically that's measured and monitored, but the IEP always does. So anytime there's a student that has a skill deficit in a certain area, and so that kind of goes back to those boxes that we checked. If you have a skill deficit in communication or behavior, or any of those other kinds of things, academic, reading, math, anything like that, we should have a goal in that area. And so the measurable annual goal is there, should be very specific, and positive. So what is the student going to be doing within 1 year's time? And how are we going to help them to do that? So given this type of instruction, Sally will be able to, whatever it is, read at a fourth grade level, or read 40 words per minute, whatever it is. And so the box just below there that's highlighted is the progress monitoring procedures. That's the other big piece that's important of the goal page, is not only what is the goal and how measurable is the goal, but then what are we getting from that? What can we tell about how that's working or not? The progress monitoring procedure will explain how will we know if it's working. And so oftentimes the tool that I see, or the rule that is used most often in Iowa from what I've seen, is called the 4-point decision-making rule. And what that is, and we've got a handout on the 4-point decision-making rule. Actually, I don't think it's on our website, so you'll have to let me know if you are interested in that information. But the 4-point decision-making rule pretty much just says that, you've got those graphs that they provide to you. Most of the time there's a graph that will monitor the kind of progress. And so if there are 4 points below what we expect, if the student hasn't made the progress that we hope that they're going to make during 4 data collections, then we need to consider whether or not the goal is working the way it's supposed to be. So we don't want to waste a whole year, or any really significant amount of time using a strategy that doesn't work. So let's make sure that if we have 4 data points that show that the progress isn't happening the way we need it to, that we're going to make some instructional decisions and change that. So maybe we'll try a different strategy of teaching. Maybe maybe the goal needs to be changed in some way. Teachers can go ahead and make those instructional changes on their own. It's not something that they would need to call a full IEP meeting together for. But I think that if we're having, numerous instructional changes throughout the year, and the student just continues to not really make that progress, then we need to really go back to that evaluation. And, is there another evaluation that needs to be done to have a better understanding of what the needs are? So I think that the progress monitoring can be very important and sometimes overlooked a little bit. So just wanted to show this goal page to everybody so that you get a little bit familiar with it and comfortable with understanding kind of what to look for with that goal. So the next page will document the services. This is the F page, and there's a lot of different things that can be put into the services pages. Any kind of service, support, or accommodation that the student is receiving should be documented here. And so, this would include like the related services, your occupational therapy, your speech therapy, any kind of health service, any kind of training for the teachers, the staff, the parents, all kinds of different things should be documented here. Every time there's a goal, there should also be this specially designed instruction piece. That's really the big difference between the 504 plan and the IEP. The 504 plan allows for all kinds of accommodations, but the IEP really provides that specially designed instruction. And so that's really the big important difference between the two, is that specially designed instruction. So for every area that a student is below grade level and has a goal, that student should have specially designed instruction. And so pretty much, what are the strategies that the student is learning in order to catch up to their peers or to be at grade level with that skill. So, so there should always be specially designed instruction for each goal that a student has. And so you'll notice also that I've circled here on the screen the beginning date, the provider, and the time and frequency. So we really need to be specific, again, like the 504 plans. When is this going to happen? Who's going to do it? When does this all begin? And then the blue circles that I have on there document not only when, but where is this going to happen. So is this service provided in the general education setting, in the regular classroom? Is it in the special education classroom? Or sometimes it could be in the community. Some students will go out for, some kind of experiential learning, like going to the grocery store or going to the bank or different things like that. So how many minutes would each service be provided in what setting? So that's really what this page is to document. Who, what, where, when, why, how are the big things here. So now, down at the very bottom, just below the blue circles, I've got the LRE removal time out of gen ed. So that will kind of tell you the total. How much time is that student being pulled out from their general education environment total? What's the total time in their gen ed classroom, and what's the total time in their special ed classroom? And so that's just kind of a good way to see how much, what percentage of the day is that student in what environment. There's really a lot that's being done with collaborative co-teaching models. Special education really does not have to be the room at the end of the hallway anymore. There's lots of kids that have special education services that never go into a special ed classroom. And so there's a lot of cool ways that we can provide services to kids without having to pull them into a more restrictive setting. And so that's really what that LRE, that least restrictive environment, is about. If there is any way that we can provide a service or a support to keep a student in their least restrictive environment, or to keep them in that gen ed classroom, we should try that before moving them to a more restrictive setting. So, if we can provide some kind of computer technology, or, even if it's an associate or something, that might be a little less restrictive at times than, having that student just in the special ed classroom all the time. So, so it's important to really think about that least restrictive environment with these services. And so just the same as with 504, there's procedural safeguards with the IEP. The big thing is that meeting notices and parental right notices are provided in writing. The other big thing that I think is the best tool that a parent has in the IEP process is this prior written notice. And a lot of families don't know about this, so I've included the form here. Anytime there's a change to the IEP, or if the parents have requested that something would be included in the IEP and the team says, no, we can't do that, they could ask for a prior written notice of that decision. So what kind of data did the team use to make that decision? What other options were considered, and why is this the best option for this student? So I suggest you ask for that prior written notice just anytime you really can. It's a good thing to ask for, even if you don't necessarily ask for the written notice itself. These are just good questions to ask anyway. So come back to this form. I've got a handout about prior written notice on our website. It's the best known, the best secret in town. And so I've got just a few more minutes here to go through a comparison. Just a quick comparison of the two. They're both federal laws that apply to children, and the Section 504 applies to to anybody, all ages. IDEA is just birth to 21. So kids under IDEA could go to school through age 21 if they are eligible. The Section 504 allows equal access and has a duty to not discriminate. Under IDEA, it provides specialized instruction. It's actually an entitlement, and provides special services. So, the 504 is non-discriminatory, whereas the IDEA is an entitlement. It's a little bit different there. The other thing is the specialized instruction. That's that real big difference. Specialized instruction and related services under IDEA, but 504 only allows for reasonable accommodations. Both of them have a FAPE requirement, though. It's that free and appropriate public education. So every kid with a disability is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. The evaluation process is a little bit different for each one. And like I said, for Section 504, it's different for every district. For IDEA, it's different for every state. And so the eligibility is based on a few different things. Under Section 504, it's a disability that substantially limits one or more life activities and requires accommodation to prevent discrimination. For eligibility under IDEA, you have to have a disability and a need for specially designed instruction or specialized instruction to benefit from your education. Both systems have procedural safeguards and rights for families around what to do if things aren't going well. Those safeguards are a lot more thorough under IDEA. There's a lot more rights to parents and just a lot more, oh gosh, I don't know. There's just so much more there under IDEA than 504. But I think with good documentation and following the processes, asking the right questions, you can really get a lot out of the 504 process as well. The plan is just called a little bit different, the IEP versus the 504 accommodation plan. And both plans should be developed with a team of people. For me, I think it's really about brainstorming. It takes a group of people that have lots of different perspectives to really understand what it takes to educate a student really thoroughly and have access and the same opportunities as everybody else. And so I think of these meetings as brainstorming sessions, regardless of what you call it. The important thing is that we've got some good ideas and some good documentation of what the needs are. So the other big difference is the IDEA requires a continuum. Services could be provided in a gen ed classroom, but they might also be provided in a hospital. They might be provided at home. Actually, some IDEA services are provided in prisons. So, IDEA is really required to be provided across all settings related to school. And so it's just not the same with Section 504. Section 504 allows for accommodations so that you can access that gen ed classroom. It's really about that gen ed. Most of the stuff that happens for 504 is going to happen in the general education setting. So, you don't have that same kind of continuum available as you do under IDEA. The other big difference then is the federal funding. There is no federal funding for Section 504 as there is with IDEA. Students with disabilities under IDEA receive a certain amount of money extra, or the district receives a little extra money for those kids that have IEPs. But if a student has a 504 plan, the school is required to provide those services without any additional funding. So, that can be the other benefit of having an IEP is just that it does have that little extra funding for schools. So, just a very quick overview is the IDEA is Special Education and Related Services and Entitlement for Eligible Students. Section 504 is reasonable accommodations and modifications without discrimination based on disability. So I know that I just totally flew through that stuff. There was tons of information in there. Somehow I don't see a lot of questions still. I'm not sure if you guys are listening or not, but there are some resources that I thought might be helpful. I'm going to show, I think I can do this here. I'm not, hope I don't mess things up too much, but there is this handout that I thought was good through the National Association of School Psychologists that really is kind of an overview, very short overview of some of the things that I've talked about today, 504, IEPs, and how to work with the schools on some of this stuff. There are also some resources, some other resources that you might be interested in. So, oops. So here are some websites that might be helpful in having some additional handouts or resources that you might be looking for. I did also notice that the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa has some wonderful handouts on, there's one that's like a special education IEP checklist for students with brain injury. There's also a 504 plan checklist for students with brain injury. All kinds of different things like that around school. So those couple in particular looked really, really helpful for parents. So I don't know. I think Brandy said that you could contact the Brain Injury Alliance for more information about those.
Yep, we have those on
I'll open it up for
here.
questions. Okay, great.
Yep.
So
there is one
if there
question,
are any
Mari.
questions. Okay.
If we can get a copy of the 4-point decision-making rule,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. We can talk about how to do that.
Okay, that would be great.
Yep. It's nice to have the visuals. I was kind of doing some hand action over here that you guys couldn't see. So it's helpful to have visuals. Are there any other questions right now?
There is another question. In your opinion, is there a benefit of having both the IEP and 504 plan in place for a student?
Okay, I apologize because I didn't make that clear enough. If you have an IEP, there would be no need for a 504 plan. Anything that would be included that would be included in a 504 plan could also be included in an IEP. So what I would say is if you can qualify for an IEP, great. Let's go for that. It's going to be a little more thorough. There shouldn't be any situation where you would need both, because anything you could do with an IEP could be done with a 504 plan, or anything you can do under 504 could be done under IDEA. Not the reverse, but so if you can choose, if it's up to the parents to choose, I would go for the IEP because it's a little more thorough.
Great. I think that's very helpful for folks to know that. Also wanted to just let people know that this webinar will be archived. So if you have coworkers or colleagues that you want to refer this information to, it will be archived on our website.
Sounds good.
Any other questions? I don't see any in the question box here, so I think we might be done. Thanks so much, Mari. This has been very informational. I know I personally learned a lot, actually. So thank you again.
Oh, good. Yeah, I can definitely come and do more sometime or less, or focus a little bit more in one piece or another. But there's so much to know, and I think it's really about kind of doing some homework and trying to prepare. When families come into these situations, the best they can do is to have a little background information so that they know that the process is being followed the way it's supposed to be. And so, if you ever have questions around what that looks like, I'm happy to answer those questions for you. We have staff at Ask that are really there to help answer those kinds of questions. And I know that you guys here at Brain Injury are really good at that too. So, ask us if there's anything we can do to help, and we're happy to do that.
Great. And I'll make sure and pass along the contact information and the website for Ask
Oh,
when I
there it
send
is.
out the other information. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks
Okay, sounds
again,
good.
folks. And I think we'll go ahead and end it.
Sounds good. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Bye bye.